Hello, everyone. We'll start in a minute. We're waiting for Geshe.
לחכות לגשם מה בשביל לדבר על הדנה, או שחבל שהיא תשב ותחכה?
Okay, so yeah, maybe we can start. Liora can just maybe if we need to help Geshe to connect. But in the meantime, Liora would want to say a few words. So maybe you can start.
I'll start in English and then I'll see if it's okay, and if not, I'll go to Hebrew. My wish to say a few things here in this class or teaching came from after a meeting that I participated with the Committee of the Dharma Friends of Israel that happened maybe, an annual meeting that happened maybe a month ago. And I had a feeling that me and some other friends that participate in all these beautiful activities don't really have contact with the organization and with the needs of the organization, or not enough. And I wish to say a few things about it, because this Zoom make us many new friends, but we don't meet personally. And it's like a placard, or how do you say it? Something that is flat. And we don't understand, first of all, that beyond this activity, beyond this teaching that you have, this treasure, there are few people who work very hard so that it can happen. And I want to just to say, I thought that I want to say their names so we can appreciate it. And there's Shachar and Gila and Liora Kenneth, Iki and Irit, and Tzipi, the committee, the VAD of the Dharma Friends, who are working really all the time very hard to make these things happen. And all of them are working voluntarily. Nobody get any money, any salary for that. And there are a few people who are helping, but they are the people who on a daily basis work for the website, for the planning, for the contact with the teacher, for what to put in the website, for the lawyer things, and etc. So this is one thing that I want to say. And the other thing is about the dana that we give. And I see for myself that sometimes, first of all, when I lead sometimes the meditations or the Tara practice, or when it was the course about the death, I forget at all to talk about it somehow, as if it's not connected to the Dharma. And this is a little, it's not because we don't like to talk about it, it's just not in my mind. And sometimes it's not in my mind also to give the dana. So I thought maybe some other of my friends have the same problem. So I wanted to raise this money. Money, it's not a problem. It's a fact that we need financials. I asked Tipi, who is our financial person, to give me a list of the things that we spend money on, and there's a lot of them. And it's not only the Zoom, and there's insurance, and there is the website, and there is the העמותות והדומן, there are so many things that our organization pays every month, and this organization that I know for many, many years, always we have the feeling, are we going to make it or not going to make it? Are we going to make it or not? And Annie Losang said many times that it's a miracle that we survive. It's on a Dana basis. So I just felt like encouraging us to think about it and to use this beautiful teaching that Geshe Kelsang Wangmo taught us about generosity. And I really, personally, I really took to my heart this, it's mentioned in the text that the Bodhisattva is happy when somebody asks him to give. And I tried it, and it's very, very nice. When somebody asks me money in the telephone, like all these donations, oh yes, of course, I'm happy to give. So there are two aspects of this dana. One is that we really need the money to continue. And the second is to use this beautiful teaching and to develop our generosity in order to be a bodhisattva and to get finally enlightened. So that's all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lior. And thank you, Geshe-ma, and all for joining us.
Thank you. Well, I'm sorry for being late. I misplaced my phone and I couldn't find the contacts to be able to sign back in, but it all worked out. So great. Now, thank you very much, Leora, for pointing this out. And let's do the meditation. Let's start with the meditation as usual. A few moments of breathing meditation and then setting the motivation. And now visualize in the space in front of you, Buddha Shakyamuni in the form of a fully ordained monk, and surrounding the Buddha are all the great masters of the Indian tradition as well as the Tibetan tradition, in particular Nagarjuna, Ayadeva, Chandakirti. And they're all in the nature of your own personal spiritual teacher. Even if you can't visualize them, just feel their presence in the space in front of you. And then surrounding these great beings in front of you, as well as yourself, are all sentient beings. And now think that we have this precious opportunity now. We've found the Dharma and a lot of freedoms and opportunities to practice the Dharma. As a means to reduce and eventually eliminate all of our suffering, but also to help other sentient beings to reach liberation from all their problems, from all their obstacles. And so let's generate the motivation to become fully enlightened for the welfare of countless sentient beings, for us to develop the ability to lead other sentient beings from all their sufferings. So with this mind of bodhicitta, let's recite the prayers together. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the accumulation of merits of practicing generosity and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the accumulation of merits of practicing generosity and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the accumulation of merits of practicing generosity and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. May all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all sentient beings never be separated from happiness that is free from suffering. May all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free from attachment for friends and hatred for enemies. Okay, great. Now, before we start with the text, I was asked to say a few words about reciting Tara mantras in light of the present situation. This was, well, fastly recommended a few weeks ago when His Holiness the Dalai Lama was asked what would be a good method to counteract this disease. What can we do in terms of our practice? And His Holiness suggested at that time to do the mantra of green Tara. And now Jadro Rinpoche has again recommended this. He was asked, Gila sent me a message that he was asked about this, and Jadro Rinpoche also stressed again that it was important for the Dharma Friends of Israel to recite, the members of the Dharma Friends of Israel and everyone else connected to recite Tara mantra, or anyone really should recite this mantra. However, it's of course much easier to recite a mantra to make it effective if we know a little bit about it. So I was asked to say a few words about Tara, about this practice in particular. We don't have that much time to go into much detail. So if you're interested, of course, there's literature available on green Tara. But just to say a few words, so green Tara, that it's a Sanskrit word and it actually means star or planet. In Tibetan, it's Dolma. And Dolma is a word that means mother of liberation or female liberator. And in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, there is a distinction, of course, between the non-tantric system, the sutric system, and the tantric system. But the dividing line between those two is not that strong. Sometimes tantric practices become also part of the sutric aspect. So this is the case here, because in the sutric system, in Mahayana sutric Buddhism, in Tibetan tradition, Tara is seen as a bodhisattva, and a bodhisattva of compassion, a bodhisattva of enlightened activity, of action. While in the tantric system, Tara is a female Buddha. And in particular with regard to the tantric system, so in the sutric system, it's become part of the sutric system, but it's actually, of course, mainly found in the tantric system. Now, there is no harm, even though we're not tantric practitioners, if one doesn't have any initiation and so forth, still it is admissible to recite the mantra and to connect with this female bodhisattva, in this case, in the sutric system, but also with the knowledge that actually it refers to a female Buddha, to recite the mantra in order to fully benefit from what Tara stands for. So really in the highest sense, in terms of the explanation that is accepted, of course, mainly on the tantric system, but still, this is how it's accepted in general, is that we talk about certain qualities that all the Buddhas possess, and that we ourselves actually have in the form of a potential. And these qualities, since they're so amazing, of course, the enlightened qualities of compassion, etc., they're so amazing, and they're hard to visualize. And oftentimes we use the symbolism of a particular Buddha form, a Buddha figure, where, for instance, Avalokiteshvara or Chenrezig is the embodiment of all the compassion of the Buddha. Manjushri is the embodiment of all the wisdom of the Buddhas. And then in this case, Tara, green Tara in particular here, and I'll say a little bit more about her. Green Tara is the embodiment of all the enlightened activities of the Buddhas and of our own skillful means, enlightened activities, compassion as well, and our ability to overcome problems and obstacles. An ability that right now is only there, well, to a certain degree it is there, but in a very small form, such that of course we can't be as We can't be as effective as a Buddha can be, but the potential is there, and this potential needs to ripen. And through Tara practice, this is a technique, a very effective technique where we use certain practices in order to activate this own ability, our own ability of the enlightened activity, but also at the same time connect with the enlightened activities of all Buddhas, of all enlightened beings. And this is what we do with this practice, in particular here of reciting the mantra. His Holiness didn't say, I don't think Jadurum, she said anything more than just to recite the mantra. But what you could visualize is this green Tara, this female Buddha. You'll find images online. I'll say a few words about what she looks like in a moment, but you'll find images anyway. Visualize this as an embodiment of your own potential to engage in enlightened activities, remove problems, etc., but also the ability of all Buddhas as an embodiment in the space in front of you, of course also of your spiritual teacher who you have a special karmic connection to, and then to visualize green light coming from this being while you recite the mantra, which can be maybe posted on the WhatsApp group, but you can also Google it. You'll find plenty of websites with the green Tara mantra, and then to recite this mantra, so as it was recommended. Now, this female aspect, as I said, green in color, this female aspect can also appear in different colors. White is quite popular, white Tara, as in removing diseases and death as a force that can help us to overcome premature death. Then you have blue Tara, red Tara. Blue Tara is, for instance, a protector in the Nyingma tradition called Ekajati. Different practices. There's red Tara associated with Padmasambhava and Geshe Tsogyal and so forth. But here it's green Tara. Green Tara, who is called the swift liberator sometimes, and also the way she looks, the way she appears, she's shown in a posture of ease at the same time as readiness for action. So her left leg is folded in the contemplative posture, while her right leg is outstretched, ready to spring into action. And then her left hand makes the refuge granting gesture, and her right hand the gesture of granting, of generosity, of giving. And in both hands she holds a lotus, a blue lotus, and a utpala flower, which symbolize purity and power. So this is how you can visualize her. And as I said, oh, there you have her, exactly. Anyway, so if you visualize her in that form and recite the mantra, Om Tare Tutare Turu Soha, then this is said to be effective at this day and age, in particular to deal with this disease, this pandemic, to deal mainly also with our reaction, because Tara is explained to be a force that helps us not just to overcome obstacles, but also to overcome fear. So fear in general, but also fear from 8 obstructions, 8 obstacles. So they talk about obstacles in terms of lions, in terms of wild elephants, fire, snakes, bandits and thieves, bondage and so forth. But these mainly refer to certain afflictive emotions. So ignorance, arrogance, hatred and anger, jealousy, wrong views, avarice and miserliness. So greed and miserliness. And so forth. So these are these 8 obscuration: jealousy, I said, wrong views, yes, and attachment. So to get rid of these obstacles or the fears that are associated with these, this is what Tara is said to be effective with regard to. And so you recite the mantra, and there are also different explanations as to the meaning of the mantra, though usually that's not said to be important what the mantra really means. So some explanations, there's some explanations given that Tare to Tara to Soha kind of means Tara, I pray to Tara, oh swift one, so be it. It doesn't really mean that much to you. It's not like that each word, it's important that you understand the words. It's much more important what it stands for. So the first Tare is explained to refer to overcoming suffering. Tutare is the first syllable, sorry. First is and then Tare as in suffering, overcoming suffering. Tutare, overcoming the 8 fears. And Ture means overcoming disease. So different ways in which those, is at the beginning. It refers to the purified body, speech, and mind, like the impure state that we have right now that can be transformed into the enlightened body, speech, and mind of a Buddha. That is expressed by Om. And then Soha at the end of the mantra has been translated as so be it. And really the mantra, the syllables that are typical or that are unique to Tara are Tare tu Tare Ture. And it is said that the meaning, of course, is most important, but even the words or what it refers to is most important, that you connect with this energy. That's most important. But even those words, they help us to do so. And there's certain vibrations. There's some explanation that these vibrations affect our body and our mind in a certain way, just reciting them either silently or loud. And this is called a mantra, which translates into protecting the mind. So this mantra protects your mind, but what is even more important is the actual visualization, the practice that you do visualizing Tara, requesting her assistance, basically connecting with this particular energy while reciting the mantra. Okay, so especially now in terms of the disease, which of course it's a huge obstacle. It's an obstacle to our daily life. It's an obstacle in terms of fear and so forth. So this is what was recommended by, as well as His Holiness, as well as Jadu Rinpoche. And so I thought to give you that brief explanation. And of course, if you're interested, you can read more about it in the different literatures on, or the literature on Tara, which you can research online. Okay, great. Now to return to the text, we've now completed the first 2 chapters, and I'd like to continue now with the 3rd chapter, the chapter on patience. Now, patience, the word patience in Tibetan, Zopa, is a word that in general it is translated as patient. In the most common way, the most common translation, the most common sense of that word is patience as well as forbearance. It's just another word that's sometimes used. So patience and forbearance. But it can mean a lot of other things. So even when you speak, this is one of the words. There's certain words in the Dharma that are not used in colloquial in Tibetan. But Zopa is used in colloquial. So when there is some problem, some issue, and you don't know how to deal with it, you may get the advice to meditate on Zopa Gom, which again can mean being patient. It can also mean to be tolerant, accepting. It can refer to courage, fortitude, or courage. So it has all these different meanings. But as I said, the main meaning is patience, which is why it's usually translated as patience or forbearance. But it can also include tolerance, acceptance, and so forth. So this is just for the term itself. And it is defined as a mental factor that is able to bear, first of all, harm by others, is able to bear suffering, and is able to bear the hardships of the Dharma, or it's able to bear dharmic practice. So whatever that involves. All right. So patience is an incredibly important quality, even more important than generosity and ethical discipline for the reasons that I explained here. And it is a lot harder to practice. So it's said to be generosity is easiest than ethical discipline. It's slightly more difficult. And even more difficult, of course, is anger. But of course, important too, because it can give rise to the opposite of the first two perfections. It can lead to miserliness, to avarice, to greed. At the same time, it can also lead to unethical conduct, even more directly. So, and of course, as I will explain now, it is so dangerous to have anger because it can harm us not just in the moment, but in the long term. And it's very difficult because it's one of those emotions that can arise very strongly and very powerfully. And once they're there, it's very difficult to go against them right away. While the opposite of miserliness, the opposite of generosity, which is miserliness, the opposite of ethical conduct, the wish to harm someone, that is not as powerful. It can, of course, come from anger and then be very powerful, but it doesn't have to be. So the wish to engage in an unethical action is not as powerful necessarily as anger is. And anger, the word anger is also one of those words that can include full-blown anger, anger that is so strong and so powerful that it induces murder, that it induces the most horrific acts. But it can also be very subtle, and it's still called anger. Like it can arise in the form of resentment, of dislike, etc. So they're different. There's like a huge range of different forms of different kind of mental states that can still be called anger, no matter how coarse or subtle. And strictly speaking, they also include, to a certain degree, hatred, and they also include not resentment, but what's it called? Aversion. Okay, so the opposite of this is patience. And the text starts, though, first of all, this chapter is associated of the 10 bhumis, the 10 grounds. It's particularly associated with the third bhumi, which is called the luminous one. So the luminous bhumi. Why? There's a reason for that. Given at the very beginning with the first verse of this third chapter. But first, to just give you a bit of an outline of the entire verses, it's got 13 verses. Last time I said 20, but that was too many. It was only 13. But more, of course, than the second chapter. And also more verses than on generosity itself. So it was part of the first chapter. Anyway, so it actually consists of 4 sections. Lama Tsongkhapa gives these outlines. First, the etymology of the name. So what does the name luminous refer to? That's explained with the first verse. And then what are the qualities of this ground? What is it in association with patience? How is the practice of patience special on this level? What happens? What's special in terms of the bodhisattva who's now reached this level, whose practice of patience is surpassing, is special in comparison to the bodhisattvas on the first and the second ground? That's explained with the second verse. And then most importantly is the third. The third can be subdivided into outlines. Very beautiful explanations on why anger just doesn't make sense and how it harms us. So it's a very beautiful meditation, really. And in that way, it's called the distinctive characteristics of the first 3 perfections. No, sorry, I'm wrong. It's still the qualities of the ground, I believe. Yeah. And then the next part is the distinctive characteristics of the first 3 perfections. That's part of this chapter. And then lastly, you have a conclusion. So it's all really part of the second qualities of the ground, or the attributes, which includes what I just described, these incredible qualities the incredible qualities of patience, the importance of being patient, and so forth. Now, to start with the first outline, etymology, the meaning of the name of the third ground, which is the luminous. And it says in the text, because the fire burning of the fuels of all phenomena produces light here, this ground is called the luminous. Here, the child of the Tathagata perceives a copper-colored glow like that, of a sunrise. It's very poetic language. Well, first of all, child of the Tathagata, of course, is another name for a bodhisattva. Bodhisattva is called a child of a Tathagata, a child of a Buddha. It's another word for bodhisattva. So what happens on that ground? A bodhisattva, the bodhisattvas on this level perceive a kind of copper-colored glow like that of a sunrise. Okay, there's one aspect. But then the first two lines, because the fire burning of the fuels of all phenomena produces light here. Now this refers to, well, the fact that on this third ground, of course, with each ground, a bodhisattva moves closer to the total eradication, the total abandonment or elimination of all that's in the way, first towards becoming liberated, and thereafter, once that has been eliminated, everything that's in the way to becoming enlightened. Okay, now this moving closer, of course, it happens on the first ground, on the second ground, on the third, on the fourth, on the fifth. The bodhisattva is basically moving closer. On the 8th level of bodhisattva, removes all the obstacles to becoming liberated. In other words, afflictive obscurations. That's the technical term. Afflictive obscurations, or the obscurations to attaining liberation. They are attained on the 8th ground or on the 8th bhumi. And then full enlightenment is attained on the 11th bhumi, if you like. So 10 bhumis are still part of the bodhisattva path. And then once you've gone past the 10th bhumi, you reach Buddhahood, which is sometimes counted as the 11th bhumi, which is the goal. And on that level, you have eliminated the obstructions to Buddhahood, which are described as cognitive obscurations, as the technical term. All right, now why on this third ground? Yeah, you're moving closer. Well, big deal. You move closer all the time, you may argue. Okay, so here it is said that actually the first, and I mentioned this on a few occasions, we need to talk more about these different levels, like when do you reach the third ground and so forth. That will be part of a different translation that comes, explanation that comes later. It'll be explained. But the point is here that on the third ground, the bodhisattva, of course, meditates on emptiness directly. There's a period that is part of the third ground in which the bodhisattva engages in the meditative absorption, directly realizing emptiness. There's that period, but then there's also a period when the bodhisattva arises from that meditative absorption. And it is said that once you reach that third level, it's just somehow to do with how the mind works. On that level, they have this vision, they have this appearance of like a copper-colored glow, which is an indication of their moving closer to the fire, the meditative absorption that will eventually totally eliminate all that is in the way to liberation and Buddhahood. And it's said to be like a glow, a kind of vision that they have as an indication it's coming closer. And so that is the reason that during this post-meditative state, after they've risen from the direct realization of emptiness, when they're just like us, ordinary, or like have the appearances of things around them the way they appear to us, but without being fooled by them, because they've directly realized how phenomena actually exist in that meditative state. So when they arise from that meditative state, there's this dawning of red or orange color, which is like a vision, kind of vision. So this is where the name comes from. On that level, they have this kind of vision, an indication of course, for them moving closer. And that's why it's called the luminous. So that's just the explanation of the word. You probably remember in the first bhumi, it's called the radiant, or the great joy. It's described as pure joy or great joy because so much joy is being experienced on that level. Of course, the joy just gets stronger, but this incredible joy is experienced once you realize emptiness directly, which is the beginning of the first bhumi, and therefore it's given that name. The second bhumi is called the stainless one because on that level, the practice of pure ethical discipline is outstanding, and therefore it's kind of stainless, free from the stains of non-ethical conduct. And here, luminous, as I said, has to do with this vision. All right. Now, that part doesn't need more explanation. It's just an explanation of why it's called that. Now we'll enter the part that is more important. First of all, the qualities of this ground, the attributes, that is the forbearance, the patience itself. What is so special? This again has 4 parts. The first part is with 2 verses. What does the text show? It shows how patience or forbearance is surpassing, it's outstanding, it's preeminent on this ground. Something special, a special type of patience that bodhisattvas didn't have previously. So 2 verses talk about that. And then it talks about number 2. The next outline is how to cultivate other types of patience, just ordinary patience. Really, this is what's practical for us. How do we develop patience? What's special about it? Why doesn't it make sense to get angry? This is where the practical advice lies. So that's most important. And then there's a division of the perfection of forbearance or patience and other pure qualities. That will be explained afterwards. So I want to really get to the second point. That's for us most relevant right now. But before we get to that, first, there are 2 verses that show how forbearance is outstanding. What's special about patience or forbearance on that third bhumi that distinguishes the patience, the forbearance bodhisattvas have on that level in comparison to the previous levels. It goes on first. The text reads, this is a little brutal. Were a disturbed person to slice flesh from the bones of the body of a bodhisattva, though he be innocent, so the bodhisattva is innocent, hasn't done anything, but some disturbed person, disturbed by their own anger and hatred, they were to slice their flesh from the bones. And Lama Tsongkhapa describes it very vividly, like very slowly cuts off the flesh of the, sounds pretty gruesome. Cutting it off, ounce by ounce, over a prolonged period of time, or a prolonged period, this will serve to increase his forbearance towards the torturer. Okay, so this incredible suffering that is inflicted, this, well, in the sense of cutting his body, it has 2 aspects, of course, for us ordinary beings, the incredible pain, but also the horror of someone cutting away our body. I mean, just the horror if you were to sit there and someone cuts pieces away from you. I mean, it sounds so brutal. It is so brutal. But on that level, things are so different in the sense that pain is no longer experienced. There is probably a sensation to do with the body, but it's no longer perceived as pain. First of all, so it's not the same experience, but also there's no sense my body. Someone is doing something to my body. The sense is this inherent I that has this inherent body. This is mine. It's kind of like it's my birthright. It's deep within me, mine. There's not that sense because of the direct perception of how phenomena really exist. So in fact, this brutal act, which is kind of like the other acts, of course, they're also horrible, but this is one of the worst that you can imagine, in fact, actually serves to increase the forbearance of this bodhisattva towards the perpetrator, towards the disturbed person, call him the torturer. So that's first, number one. That describes what's so special on this level. And then the reason is given with the third verse for a bodhisattva who sees selflessness directly. So in this case, directly selflessness. Knows who cuts what, at what point in time, in what manner. Okay, so this question, the answer to that, the bodhisattva knows there's no inherent cutter. There's no inherent object that's being cut. There's no time, no inherent time when that happens in a certain manner. So there's no perpetrator, there's no object, no inherent. It's all merely labeled. So this bodhisattva sees all phenomena as images in a mirror, as similar, here it's the analogy is given, as a mirror image of your own face, for instance. It seems to be your face. It appears to be your own face, but it's not. Similarly, the perpetrator, the act, the object of cutting away at the flesh, the victim, the bodhisattva, him or herself, they appear to exist inherently, but they're not. So there's this discrepancy between appearance and actual existence. And we're fooled by this. We run right after appearance. Things appear to exist as if independently, objectively, this way or that way. However, a bodhisattva on that level is no longer fooled by that because they've already realized emptiness directly. And by seeing thus too, he, the bodhisattva, or she will have such forbearance. So in other words, on that level, there is no pain, there is not the slightest even dislike. Now the question that arises, for instance, in the commentary, the question is raised by Lama Tsongkhapa. If you read his text, his translation of his commentary on this particular, on entry into the middle way, he raises the question, well, what about those on the first and the second level? What is different to their patients on that level? And the answer to that is, well, it's not that directly explained that way, but that's how it's usually interpreted. Yes, there's no pain on the first and second level. Like you're beyond this ordinary pain. There's a sensation, of course, but it's not seen as pain. And there's also no anger. But there's still, because self-cherishing, of course, hasn't been eliminated. So the self-cherishing still kind of comes in that moment. So there's still this activation of self-cherishing in that moment, although it's not anger as such, but self-cherishing arises on the first and the second bhumi. On the third bhumi, it does not give rise to self-cherishing in any way. So any self-centeredness does not arise. Now, do bodhisattvas on that level still have anger? Well, they have anger, but it does no longer arise. So there's still, anger hasn't been totally eliminated yet. So it lies dormant, it lies latent. However, it does not become activated such as a way that they even become resentful towards someone. It's just no longer possible. They may at the outside, of course, be stern and decisive and maybe shout at someone, but that is done not out of anger, resentment, or any other form of aggression, if you like. It's pure love and compassion. So you don't have to become a friar or a sucker in any way. The external is it may look like an angry person, but it's motivated not by anger, but by love, compassion, care, and so forth. So this is not called an angry action, because anger, just as jealousy, just as all the other states, and generosity and ethical discipline, for that matter, they're all mental. They're all mental. So the actions that arise from them, they're not called generosity, ethical discipline in the same way. They're mainly mental states. And they're only given the name ethical discipline and generosity if they arise, the physical actions arise from those mental states. So the same is true for anger and for patience in that case. Okay. So I hope this is clear. What's so special about this bodhisattva? So cutting of the flesh, no patience. In fact, it increases their forbearance. So on the first and the second level, that's probably not what happens, that it even increases the level of forbearance. Okay. Now, of course, this is obviously hard to believe, hard to understand for us to ever be on that level, but it's important to understand that this is what's possible, to emulate that, to practice in that way. And of course, if we understand what is possible, that may give us the determination that will determine, it lead to the determination, the strength of mind that we feel, I can do that. I will work towards that. This is what's possible. If a bodhisattva can do it, I can do it. Anyone can do it. Okay, because we all have the same nature of the mind, the same basic pure mind, that just right now, the state of purity hasn't come through yet. But also on a practical level, then Chandrakirti then talks about anger. So how to cultivate other types of patience. So not that highest type of patience. Someone comes along and chops your arm off and you're just happy and more patient than before. No, let's leave that for this kind of level. But just ordinary, good old forbearance, good old patience. So this has two parts. First, why it is inappropriate of becoming anger. Why it doesn't make sense to become angry, to have anger, to become angry. Why it doesn't make sense. And why it makes so much sense. It's so appropriate to cultivate patience or forbearance. So it has these two aspects, the disadvantages of anger, or the uselessness, if you like, of anger, and then the qualities, the good qualities of patience and forbearance. And then the first one, the inappropriateness of becoming angry. Well, it has again 4 parts, and there are 4 verses that explain all these. First of all, the first is it doesn't make sense. It's inappropriate to become angry because it's pointless, and it has really bad consequences. Okay, so before we go into the next 3, first, verse 4, if you look at verse 4, if you respond with vengeance when someone harms you, does your bitterness, this anger, this vengeance, this resentment you feel in that moment reverse what was already done? Resentment serves no purpose here in this life, and it brings more conflicts in the world beyond too. Okay, so very important words. Okay, let's check. Someone harms me, and in that moment, after the harm has been done, there's right away anger and the wish to pay them back. This wish for vengeance, for revenge, for paying them back. So when someone harms us, and it comes out of bitterness, it comes out of resentment, it comes out of anger. But does that anger and whatever we set out to do, does that reverse what was already done? Does it really undo what was done? And of course it doesn't. I think sometimes we have a sense if we get back at them, we make things right. We get back at them and it kind of undoes the situation. It reminds me of something when, for instance, someone loses a child, loses a really close person to them, a loved one. This person is killed, and the killer gets caught, and there's this strong desire for this killer to also be killed. In some cases, of course, to be punished. Okay, that's one thing. But this in some cases, the wish for them to be either executed if the death penalty is part of the state that they're part of, or possibly the wish for oneself to go out and kill that person. It seems to make it right. So if you really think about it, of course, whatever are the reasons for this parent, for instance, to want the killer wants to see the killer dead, whatever the reasons are, but they could, in some cases, it could just really, it depends. Everyone's motives are different. So it could be that there's a sense it makes it right. But of course, we hear over and over again, if then the killer is executed, for instance, then the feeling of grief is still there because it doesn't bring the person back. Okay, the killer is dead, but the other person is still dead too. So it doesn't undo what was done. That's one aspect. But there may also be a sense of justice. If I kill the other person, it serves some justice. Or if someone harms me, if I get back to them, that's justice. But again, that is not justice. I mean, even if it's in terms of the law, from a Buddhist point of view, to execute someone, it's not justice. So from a Buddhist point of view, the death penalty is not a good idea. But on top of that, just besides that, it doesn't undo what's happened. And justice, in terms of justice, is there justice? Well, I think there is, because there's karma. I mean, there's karma. It's not, karma is not, I mean, justice is it's a difficult term because it seems to imply a person who is responsible for the justice, like some entity, maybe a celestial being who decides this is good and this is bad, this is moral, this is not, this is justice. No, but that's not what it means here. I mean, you could ask, I mean, is it justice that the autumn lets the leaves fall? Is that justice because they had the whole summer and now they have to fall and they need to grow again in the spring? So for them to grow again, they need to fall off. So the autumn is responsible for that. So there's justice. No, it's just a law of nature. It's just a law of nature in that sense. So you don't really call that justice. Is it cruel? No, it's not cruel. It's just the way it is. So karma should be seen as that. It's a law. It's a law of nature, and justice as such is difficult. It's like when you have an apple seed, an apple grows, an apple tree grows. It won't be an orange seed. No matter how many apple seeds you plant in the ground, you will never have an orange tree. And likewise, if you plant a negative seed, a negative potential has been planted, you'll get a negative result. In that sense, if I killed someone, well, sooner or later, unless the karma is purified, but that's different, well, sooner or later, we'll experience the result of that. So therefore, is there this sense of justice? Well, if you want to call it justice, of course, this person who's killed someone, they will experience the consequences. So is it up to me to take care of it? No. To kill the other person? No. Out of bitterness, etc. And because the harm does not get undone. So if someone so I should really ask myself, if someone harms me, does it serve a purpose to get angry? That's the first aspect. Now, getting angry, it's a little difficult. I mean, sometimes you find words in the scriptures that say, don't get angry. Sometimes it makes me chuckle because it's almost like saying, don't sweat. It's such an automatic reaction to tell someone don't sweat. I mean, maybe through meditation, etc., you can actually control your body temperature. All right, that's different. But right now, if someone told me don't sweat, it's not going to help. In terms of anger, I automatically get angry. So it's kind of like, make me not get angry. But the good thing about our mind is, if we think about this repeatedly, about a situation when we got angry, because we're habituated to getting angry. So if I think about this repeatedly and just realize the fact that when I react with anger, it doesn't undo the situation. It's not going to make things better. It's happened already. So what's the point getting angry? Just that first thought doesn't undo anything. So that can help, that next time when I confront a similar situation, that I can actually stop myself before I get angry and just say, well, let it go. I can train myself, not right now, just not so long ago, as Honest Dalai Lama was asked, when you're angry, does it help to meditate on emptiness? And I think it's Honest chuckled, I don't remember, but he reacted like, no, when you're angry, you won't be able to meditate on emptiness. You should do it in preparation for the next time you get angry, then it may help. So whether it's meditating on emptiness, of course, that's harder to really make unless you have a good understanding of emptiness, but more directly, more effectively right now, when we're new to the Dharma, when we don't know emptiness yet, we're relatively new to the Dharma, is considering exactly that. This what Chandrakirti he has said with these words: if you respond with vengeance when someone harms you, does your bitterness reverse what was already done? Resentment serves no purpose here in this life, and it brings more conflicts in the world beyond too. So it doesn't serve any purpose. We can still react. We can still react much more effective, and especially not just resentment, but its stronger cousin, if you like, its stronger version, which is madness, getting mad. The word is in English, it's a great word because it implies you get mad. You do things that are totally exaggerated and that do not take care of things. Basically, as it says, hatred or anger just breeds more anger, and the situation may just escalate. So therefore, it serves no purpose, neither in this lifetime, in terms of also what it brings in the future, just leads to more conflicts in the world, this world, and beyond too. Okay, so never ending. Okay, so there are lots of stories of like, if you harm someone's cousin, then this cousin will go, and so forth. It may actually lead to, well, wars between families because of getting back at the other person, this constant vengeance. All right. And what's very important, what we forget that the perpetrator of the harm is the other person. But that's not the main perpetrator. The main perpetrator is the karma we accumulated. So the harm that is inflicted on us, the main perpetrator isn't the action, the causes I created, or my previous continuum created this sometime in the past. It could have been hundreds, thousands of years ago. And, sometimes I really enjoy sometimes reading. I'm not really into history and stuff, but I sometimes enjoy just reading how different things were, so in the Middle Ages, etc. And then when you read the brutality in those days where, man in particular, mainly man, were sent out with axes and all sorts of brutal weapons to go out and slash their enemies. And if I lived in Europe at that time and I was a man, how many limbs did I chop off being maybe a very enthusiastic warrior? Who knows? And so I'm not that warrior now. I feel quite different. So stuff has happened in the meantime. But how do I know? How do I know I don't have these karmic imprints from slashing and killing and raping and all that? Could still be with me. I haven't purified them yet. Okay, so this could happen. I don't need to identify with that. I don't call myself a killer. I don't think of myself as a rapist, etc. But it could still happen, these things. And to then get a sense, okay, I also contributed to that. And that feels first a little awkward. And I cannot say this. I should never say this to someone else. Oh, it's your karma. Never, ever, ever. Never, ever. This is not meant. It's only meant for personal use. If you believe that karma makes sense, then it can be very helpful. Otherwise, there's this sense, why this happened to me? Why? I didn't do anything. I didn't do in this life, nothing. Maybe the last 10 lives I didn't do anything. But this is how karma works. You plant a seed at some point, it can help us. It can help us to deal with it and let it go. In a sense, well, it's happened and now the karma is gone. That karma can no longer ripen. Okay. Now it's easier to talk about being beaten up than rape and other things. Definitely easier to think along those lines. It's very different when it comes to certain harm, and we don't need to start with this, but to really give it some thought, to really think about, if there is karma, well, what does that mean? And so to not fall into this feeling of I'm just a victim and I can't get out of this. It's actually quite liberating. All right. Okay. Then the next part is showing how it is contradictory not to wish for consequent sufferings, yet to retaliate against harm. So how does contradictory? You don't wish to suffer again like that in the future, but if we retaliate, if we pay the other person back, if we take revenge, well, we'll actually experience that same harm again. So this is what it says in verse 5. He who speaks of exhausting the fruits of non-virtuous actions performed in the past, how can he bear to plant the seeds of future pain by inflicting harm on others and being angry at them? Right? So it's like in that moment, as described before, first of all, it doesn't make the harm undone. Secondly, if now I take revenge, if I retaliate now, well, I didn't want to experience that problem in the first place. But if that someone chops my arm off and I chop this other person's arm off, then I've created again the karma to have my arm chopped again in the future. To put it simple, I mean, whether that's really the karma, I don't know. But if I get beaten up and I beat the other person up, well, first I get beaten up. Okay, so I can't undo that karma. Of course, I should go to the police and have that person arrested and all that for their own benefit. That's different. But to just go out and beat them up myself out of bitterness and resentment, well, then I created again the karma to be beaten up. That's a little bit like you ate some rotten meat last week and today you get violently sick. And in response, you eat the same meat again, right? You eat it again, eat the same kind of meat again, and again you get sick. Okay? So eat again from the same meat. So it feels a bit like that, doesn't it? All right. And now one aspect that is discussed here, which is the next part. It is inappropriate to become angry since it destroys virtues accumulated in the past over a long period of time. So what it says here in verse 6 is really important. It says that indeed, anger felt towards bodhisattvas, conqueror children and bodhisattvas. If you actually, and we don't know who a bodhisattva is, right? We don't know that. So first of all, based on that premise, we don't know who's a bodhisattva and who's not. That destroys in an instant the virtue gathered by generosity and morality over 100 eons. Thus, there's no evil similar to intolerance. Now, this needs to be explained. This needs to be totally explained. Lama Tsongkhapa says, well, if you get angry with a bodhisattva, actually, this is meant for a bodhisattva, him or herself, who gets angry with another bodhisattva, even a higher bodhisattva. That would destroy 100 eons of that virtue. Okay, whether it's 100 eons or whatever, there's a certain amount. This is also described in, it's also part of Shantideva's Bodhisattva way of life. This idea, it's quoted, Lama Tsongkhapa quotes from this, and I'll give you more quotes next time, but for now this should do. So anger felt towards a Buddha destroys the karma. Sorry, anger towards a bodhisattva. If I'm an ordinary person, it is said that that destroys 1,000 eons of virtue gathered. Okay, now it's not that I'm not left with any virtue because we've existed since beginningless time, so there's some virtue left, but whether it can be taken literally or not, it destroys virtue. This is what powerful anger can do. It eliminates a lot of positive karma, a lot of virtue we accumulated. This is in general true for all the virtue or non-virtue we accumulate. They actually interact with one another. So you can also have the opposite case where strong virtue can purify. You wouldn't call it destroy, you would call it purify negative actions. Of course, you can purify it in a very directed way if you apply the 4 powers, the power of reliance, of regret, of the remedy, and of the resolve. If you do that, in that case, of course, you can direct a virtuous action such that that's the power of the mind, that it can specifically, a virtue can specifically get rid of negativities. But even if you don't apply the 4 powers, it's possible through the power of a virtuous action, it can destroy non-virtuous actions. So there's a constant interaction because all these non-virtues are with the mind. And they don't just stick there all the time. Sometimes they're not affected, but oftentimes they are. And there's a constant change, if you like. Therefore, if you have a lot of love and compassion, you're more likely to purify a lot of negativities from the past While on the other hand, the more anger you have, the more you actually eliminate, the more positive actions you eliminate, because anger is really, really powerful. And that anger is so powerful that it can destroy. It's just the nature of this anger that it can destroy virtue in the mind. All right. So I think it's so powerful. This is so powerful to reflect upon that. And even if you don't speak of yourself as an angry person, still, I know from my own experience, I wouldn't necessarily call myself an angry person, but I have anger, I have resentment, I have my moments of dislike and frustration over and over. And the more corona you're kind of stuck in your house, basically, it's much more obvious then. Less distractions and a lot more obvious. And this is just so effective. It's so effective to apply this reasoning. All right. Now we have a little bit time for questions. Oh, and I just see your pictures right in front of me, and I remember I received a few emails and I totally forgot to answer. So if you send me an email the last 2 weeks, I apologize. I will answer it. I was quite busy, but I will get back to you. Just yes, it's exactly you. Okay, I'll write back to you. Sorry for that. I just forgot. Okay, so please, if you have any questions. Now it's the time to ask. Oh, there are already 7.
Yes, I would like to ask.
Uh-huh.
It is said that if we dedicate.
Yes.
Our,
Sorry. There is a question by Tsuma Kamasopa. Let me answer it after Leora's question. So Leora, please go ahead.
Okay. It is said that if we dedicate our good things, so it prevents for a moment of anger to destroy all the.
Yes, that's true. Yes, that's the beauty of our mind, the dedication. So that's the aspect, and I'll say a little bit more about it next time because we don't have much time, but we can purify, we can direct our positive actions in such a way that we can purify negativities or preserve them through dedicating them towards enlightenment. That's possible. So that's so beautiful about our own mind with prayers. Prayers are actually aspirations. Prayers such as a dedication, it's a type of prayer, kind of wishful thinking that with the right kind of intention, we can preserve it. Yes. And like I said, I'll say a little bit more about this next time. Leora, does that help? Yeah? Okay. Then Venerable Tsuma Kamasopa says, the question always arises when I hear verses like this. That torture is so far from my experience, although I can feel compassion for Tibetans and their torturers. Since I'm not living those bhumis, how could I possibly generate compassion if I was tortured? Yeah, right? Yeah, right. Well, this is why we don't start with torturers. We start with annoying neighbors, I guess, right? So we start with little things. But I remember a story that His Holiness the Dalai Lama has talked about a lot, and Geshe Thupten Pesang has also talked about it. This beautiful story of when His Holiness met a Tibetan prisoner who had just been released from prison after being tortured for more than, I think, 20, 25 years. And incredible torture he went through. And so His Holiness, when he came to India, when he was able to escape, he had an audience with His Holiness, and His Holiness asked, so how was your experience? What was it like in prison? And the monk said, well, I'm fortunate to say there was only one's real danger. And His Holiness said, oh gosh, danger to your life? And the monk said, no, that I lose my compassion for my torturers. What? Right? It's this beautiful story. I heard it again and again. And I believe that. I mean, in fact, there was until he has passed away not so long ago. What was his name? Gelik? Tupten Gelik? No, not Tupten Gelik. He was this monk. He was actually my neighbor in Dharamsala. And he was in prison for 30 years. I don't know if it was him or someone else who said that to His Holiness, but he was my neighbor and he was very kind. He had these shiny new teeth, teeth. It was always nice to see him laugh, these fake white teeth. They had these huge teeth in his mouth. So he would always walk with me on the street and hold my hand, which he was an old monk, you know. He didn't, at first I was a little awkward, but he held everyone's hand, so it was okay. But we sometimes walked hand in hand and he would always talk to me. And honestly, he didn't come across as someone with PMS, no, not PMS, ooh, post-traumatic stress disorder, PSD, right? Not at all. He was this calm and kind and jolly person, and he had in fact been in prison for 30 years. So he was really able to deal with it. So none of those horrific acts. So this showed he dealt with it in a certain way, and he was actually a relative of someone who ran the Tibet house in Frankfurt for many years, and he told the same stories. He was so amazing and so calm and so jolly, despite all the torture he went through. So it is possible. I just don't know how, right? So let's not start with these difficult things. Let's not start with these difficult things, but a little easier. Bandingetsu, that's right. Thank you. Angchuk said, Mang Bandingetsu. Yes, exactly him. Oh, and then Angchuk also asked, how do we deal with aggression like that happened in France in the name of religion or supremacy? Yeah, also very difficult. But oh my God, I mean, how deluded must that person be to do something so horrific? This does not mean we should not have compassion, of course, for the victim. That's terrible, so terrible for his students, for, you know, this beautiful person, and all he's done was, well, practice freedom of speech, etc. So there's no doubt about that, that our sympathy, our compassion should be greatly with this teacher. But the worst that happened, the greatest suffering this perpetrator has, I mean, what has he done? What has he done to himself for many, many lifetimes to come, which means experiencing the same over and over, being reborn in a horrible state? I mean, he's just totally destroyed his future. And to really reflect upon that, how terrible to do that to himself out of total ignorance, total misperception, thinking this was something virtuous. I mean, it's terrible. So if you really think about it, if you put yourself into the shoes, do you want to be that perpetrator? Do you want to be that person who's so it's really effective to put ourselves into that person's shoes and then feel, do I want to be that person? Oh my gosh, if I'm caught in that wrong view, that is so terrible that it makes me go out and kill a beautiful person, and I have to carry that with me my entire life, plus suffer the consequences, possibly in this life, but many lifetimes to come. Who do I want to be if I have to take someone's place? I'd rather be the victim. That's just me. But just those are ways to think about it. But these are difficult questions. So Wangchu, your question is particularly different, similar to Makama Sopa. So let's talk about easier things initially and start off with things that are easier. On that note, it's time to meditate now and to just internalize again what Chandrakirti here says. So let's do this together. There are really just 3 points to consider, but let's do them in the form of an analytical meditation. Just take a few moments of breathing meditation, calm the mind. And now try to bring to mind a situation that ordinarily would make you angry. Try not to choose something horrific as torture, but maybe an insult by a neighbor, by a colleague, by someone who usually annoys you, or a situation that hurt you. And now think, if I were to retaliate, if I were to take revenge, would that undo what I just experienced? And secondly, well, it seems that the perpetrator of this harm is this other person. But this harm could have never happened unless I created the cause for that sometime in the past. And although the harm cannot be undone, but that means the karma that was responsible for this harm has now ripened and cannot ripen again in that same way. Isn't that reason to rejoice? That at least this karma is gone now. But on top of that, if now I retaliate, if I now take my revenge, insult the other person, or in any other way try to harm them, I create the causes for that same harm, that same situation to repeat itself in the future. That's like getting food poisoning after eating a rotten piece of meat. And as a reaction to that, eat the same meat again. So if I don't want to experience that type of suffering, does it really make sense to create the causes for it to happen again? And similarly, if I allow my anger to continue on, instead of applying the antidotes to getting angry, this force of anger can potentially destroy so much of the positive karma I've accumulated in the past. How hard is it to accumulate a lot of merit, a lot of positive karma, in comparison to accumulating negative karma? Do I really want to destroy all that by allowing my anger, my resentment, my dislike to run wild? And so now to conclude your meditation, whatever conclusion you yourself have come to in terms of not retaliating and not allowing your anger to run wild, focus on that for a few moments and allow this to sink deeper to a more emotional level. And then generate the heartfelt determination. Next time a situation arises that would ordinarily make me angry, I will watch my mind and try not to get angry. Or at least, if I do get angry, apply the antidotes right away. And so now also for this week, I want you to practice exactly this: patience, but also patience with yourself. If you find to get frustrated, angry with yourself, again, apply the reasoning presented by Chandrakirti, adjust it accordingly, and of course, in the same way, to practice this throughout this week, to pay special attention to situations you find annoying, watch your mind, and apply the reasoning as good as you can, and in particular to structure your morning meditation, to take those verses by Chandrakirti. Those are your analytical meditation in preparation for any situation throughout the day. And of course, hold on to bodhicitta. Again, as before, try 20 times a day, again and again, generate bodhicitta. Don't let go. However hard it is, even you can't feel it properly, just hang in there and continue. Even if you just say those words without really feeling it, just don't give up on that. And let's now also conclude the session today. Let's do exactly what Leora mentioned early on. Whatever virtue we've accumulated, to make sure it does not get destroyed by anger, whatever virtue we've accumulated here today as a group, studying about the third chapter of Chandrakirti's entry into the middle way, may that become one of the causes for our own enlightenment, for the welfare of all sentient beings. And with this motivation, not letting go of the mind of dedication, there's a new version. Let's recite the dedication prayer. May all beings everywhere, plagued by sufferings of body and mind, obtain an ocean of happiness and joy by virtue of my merits. May no living creature suffer, commit evil, or ever fall ill. May no one be afraid or belittled, with a mind weighed down by depression. May the blind see forms, and the deaf hear sounds. May those whose bodies are worn with toil be restored on finding repose. May the naked find clothing, the hungry find food. May the thirsty find water and delicious drinks. May the poor find wealth, those weak with sorrow find joy. May the forlorn find hope, constant happiness, and prosperity. May there be timely rains and bountiful harvests. May all medicines be effective and wholesome prayers bear fruit. May all who are sick and ill quickly be freed from their ailments. Whatever diseases there are in the world, may they never occur again. May the frightened cease to be afraid and those bound be freed. May the powerless find power, and may people think of benefiting each other. For as long as space remains, for as long as sentient beings remain, until then may I too remain to dispel the miseries of the world. Okay, great. Thank you very much. Okay, so I hope it's clear what to do for this week. Please try to the best of your ability. Morning meditations are clear. Of course, bodhicitta, please don't let go. And lastly, of course, patience. Make that your central practice for this week. And then I'll see you again next week. All right. Have a good week.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Geshe-ma.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sil.
Okay, everyone. See each other next week. Bye bye.
Thank you.